She was just 24 when she stepped through the towering glass doors of Seattle's most elite financial institution. Her footsteps were quiet, her presence almost unnoticeable, but in her hands she carried a simple folder, ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in its contents. Inside were patterns, red flags, and data anomalies that, if taken seriously, could save the company millions and shield countless innocent people from financial ruin. But no one in that room saw her for what she was. Not a savior, not a visionary, not even a contender. Instead, they saw a nervous young woman with shaky hands and eyes that rarely met their own. She was brushed aside, her warnings ignored, rejected, humiliated, discarded. What they didn't realize, what no one in that polished boardroom had the insight to see, was that they had just dismissed a genius. Not the loud, charismatic kind that commands a room, but the kind of brilliance that sees what others miss, the kind that listens before it speaks, the kind that works quietly, in shadows, uncovering truths that could bring down giants. The biggest financial scandal of the year, the one that nearly brought a billion-dollar empire to its knees, was not averted by government agents or elite cybersecurity firms. It wasn't stopped by AI or complex algorithms. It was prevented by Lucy Maddox, a woman so soft-spoken her voice barely carried across a table, a woman whose social anxiety kept her from making eye contact, let alone bold statements. A woman who had spent most of her life being underestimated because she didn't know how to market her mind. And yet, beneath her silence lived a razor-sharp intellect, and a gift so rare that when it finally reached the right ears, it would not only alter her own life, but shift the course of an entire industry. This is not just a story about resilience or success. This is a story that tears apart our ideas of what intelligence looks like, how it behaves, how it sounds, and who gets to define it. This is a story that challenges the loud, the confident, the polished, with the quiet, the careful, the deeply perceptive. But before we get to the moment Lucy's whisper exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud and changed everything, we need to talk about something more personal. Have you ever been the quiet one in the room, the observer, the thinker? Have you ever felt invisible, like your ideas were too complex, too thoughtful, or simply too quiet to be heard in a room where only the boldest voices win? Have you ever watched someone with less insight get all the attention simply because they spoke louder or faster? If you've ever walked away from a conversation thinking, I had something important to say, I just couldn't get it out in time, then Lucy's story isn't just a narrative. It's a mirror. It's proof that brilliance doesn't need volume. That observation and introspection are strengths, not shortcomings. That quiet wisdom might be the most overlooked force in our world today. And if you're someone who believes that people like Lucy deserve to be seen, to be heard, and most of all, to be believed, then you're in the right place. Because what unfolds in the story ahead isn't just redemption, it's revolution. It's the story of a woman who had been overlooked her entire life, who carried within her the quiet power to change the course of a company, and who only needed one person to listen. You'll see how a single moment of recognition can rewrite a life, and how that one changed life can echo across an entire system. You'll discover that sometimes the softest voices carry the most explosive truths, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why Marcus Doyle, CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, would one day say, "The best decision I ever made in business was to stop talking and listen to someone everyone else ignored." So find a quiet corner, settle in, let the noise of the world fade, because this story will take you on a journey from silence to recognition, from heartbreak to triumph. This is the story of Lucy Maddox, a woman whose soft-spoken truth rewrote history. And once you hear it, you'll never look at a quiet person the same way again. Lucy never quite fit into the world that surrounded her. At 24, she held a gift, a mind engineered to see what others missed, but it was wrapped in layers of anxiety, years of grief, and a voice that barely rose above a whisper. To truly understand the brilliance hidden within her, we have to rewind time. We have to visit the moment when her world cracked open, and something unbreakable began to form in the pieces. She was just 7 when her parents were killed in a car crash. One moment she was an endlessly curious, chatterbox little girl who dreamed of becoming a teacher like her mother. The next, she was silent. A child moved by fate and tragedy into the small, book-lined apartment of her grandmother, Martha Maddox. Her suitcase was light, but her grief was impossibly heavy. Martha was 63 then, a retired school teacher and a widow herself. A woman of routine, of gentle structure, and above all, of quiet understanding. She didn't ask Lucy to speak. She didn't rush her grief. She simply created space for it. Every morning, the two of them sat in silence at the tiny kitchen table. Coffee for Martha, cereal and milk for Lucy. No forced smiles, no awkward pep talk, just a quiet presence. A constant heartbeat in a world that no longer made sense. Over the years, Lucy never fully regained her childhood voice. The trauma had left its mark in quiet ways, in the way she measured her words, the way she hesitated before speaking, the way her eyes always scanned a room for exits before people. But something else had formed in that silence, a heightened sense of attention, a way of listening so intensely it felt like she could hear what others were too distracted to notice. She didn't speak much, but she saw everything. Where others overlooked contradictions, Lucy saw fault lines. Where others rushed to solve problems, she waited, watching, thinking, and then, quietly, she would offer a solution that left adults stunned. Her teachers were amazed by her, but it was her grandmother who truly understood her. While others worried about how withdrawn Lucy seemed, Martha noticed how her granddaughter could solve puzzles designed for adults. How she could trace lies in bedtime stories. How her mind worked like a detective's. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly, relentlessly logical. And that, Martha knew, was not something that needed to be fixed. It was a gift, a rare and beautiful one, and one day it would change the world. Every evening, after dinner, Martha would settle into her old rocking chair while Lucy worked quietly at the small kitchen table. The air between them was always filled with the soft rhythms of life, the gentle clicking of knitting needles, and the faint tapping of a laptop keyboard. It was during one of those evenings, wrapped in their quiet ritual, that Martha spoke words Lucy would never forget. "Some people need to speak to think," she said, not looking up from her knitting. "They talk to sort out their thoughts, to hear themselves and feel grounded. But you, my sweet girl, you think in silence. You think deeply. You see connections others miss because your mind isn't cluttered by the need to express every fleeting idea. That's your gift." Lucy said nothing, but her fingers paused above her keyboard. She felt something tighten in her chest. Recognition. Relief. By high school, her teachers had already begun adapting to her needs. They stopped asking her to give oral presentations, instead allowing her to demonstrate her brilliance through written exams and project reports. They understood something most educators miss, that intelligence doesn't always wear a confident smile or raise its hand in class. Sometimes it waits in the quiet until someone makes room for it to speak. Lucy graduated valedictorian. But when it came time to deliver the speech, she couldn't bear the thought of standing at the podium, all eyes on her. So instead, Martha stood beside her, reading her words aloud. Lucy stood silently, hands folded, eyes downcast. And yet, there wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Her words, spoken in Martha's soft, steady voice, reached something raw and honest in every listener. It was the first time Lucy's silence had moved a crowd. College, however, was harder. The University of Washington's data science program was fast-paced, competitive, and populated by students who thrived on participation. Lucy often found herself lost in group projects, struggling to keep up with the assertiveness of her peers. Oral presentations were a source of constant dread, but when it came to the numbers, the data, the logic, the patterns, Lucy shined. Her professors learned quickly, don't judge her by her silence. Her written analyses were consistently the most insightful in class. While others used flashy visualizations and rehearsed speeches, Lucy submitted pages of tightly woven logic and piercing observations. Her brilliance was undeniable, even if her voice was soft. It was in her junior year, during a course on financial fraud detection, that Lucy truly found her calling. While most of her classmates applied algorithms and pre-built models to identify inconsistencies, Lucy stared at the raw data, thousands of rows of transactions, for hours. She wasn't searching for surface-level anomalies. She was feeling for rhythm, imbalance, the spaces where the numbers didn't breathe right. And then she saw it. A faint, elegant pattern, like a ripple in still water. Something hidden, a sophisticated fraud ring buried beneath seemingly normal data. It was so subtle that even her professor dismissed it at first as coincidence. But Lucy persisted. She mapped it, cross-referenced it, and created a model that brought it into sharp relief. Her findings led to an investigation and ultimately the arrest of 12 people behind a massive identity theft operation. The FBI took notice. They offered her a position, a fast-track career among federal investigators, fraud analysts, and cybersecurity professionals. It was a dream job on paper. But Lucy declined. The idea of working in a high-pressure government agency, surrounded by loud voices, hard deadlines, and a culture built on constant confrontation, it suffocated her. She couldn't breathe in that world. So she returned home, to the quiet apartment she shared with Martha, back to the rhythms that made her feel safe, warm tea, clicking needles, quiet routines. But now there was something heavier hanging in the air. Martha, now 82, was growing frail, her movements slower, her voice a little more tired each day. Her medical bills were piling up. Diabetes, high blood pressure, early signs of osteoarthritis. The cost of aging quietly mounting. Their rent was rising faster than Martha's modest pension could cover, and Lucy's freelance data analysis gigs, while mentally fulfilling, barely kept the lights on. She had applied to dozens of companies over the past year, each application crafted with care, each rejection arriving like a quiet slap. Her resume was impressive. Her academic achievements, awards, and even the FBI commendation, all listed. But how do you write "sees truth in chaos" on a resume? How do you explain intuition in a job interview? How do you express the kind of insight that lives in the spaces between numbers? Every interview felt like a test she wasn't built to pass. The small talk, the expectation to sell herself, to maintain eye contact while reciting her own virtues. It was like speaking a foreign language with no dictionary. Most ended the same: polite nods, vague promises, and an email that arrived days later with phrases like stronger communication skills or better fit for collaborative environments. Each rejection left another crack in her confidence. Lucy began to doubt everything: her professors, her talent, her worth. Maybe her ability to spot fraud wasn't a skill. Maybe it was just a strange quirk, a fluke. And then one evening, as Lucy sat scrolling through another rejection email, eyes hollow and shoulders heavy, Martha looked up from her knitting and made a decision. "Lucy," she said, voice calm and gentle, "I want to tell you something about your mother." Lucy's head snapped up. Martha rarely spoke about her daughter. The memories were too precious, too painful. "She was a lot like you," Martha continued, her needles clicking steadily. "Quiet, brilliant, She could walk into a classroom and instantly know which child needed help, not just academically but emotionally. She just knew. Martha's voice softened, filled with pride and nostalgia. The other teachers would ask how she could tell. Sarah would just shrug. She couldn't explain it. She saw the way you see patterns in numbers, except she saw them in people. Lucy had never heard this before. Her mother's quiet gift mirrored her own. "What happened to her?" she whispered. "What happened to that gift?" Martha smiled gently. "It flourished. Once she found the right school, the right principal, who understood that not all great teachers are allowed. She became a legend. Parents requested her by name. Teachers came to her for advice. She made a difference, not by speaking loudly, but by listening deeply." Then Martha set her knitting aside and looked directly at Lucy. "But here's the thing. My sweet girl," Martha began softly, her eyes never leaving her knitting. "Your mother didn't find her place right away either. It took her 3 long years to find the school where her way of teaching was truly seen as a strength. 3 years of being told she was too gentle, too quiet, not assertive enough. There were moments when she almost gave up the profession entirely." Lucy felt the sting of tears welling in her eyes. The parallel between her mother's path and her own struck with piercing clarity. "What made her keep going?" she whispered. Martha paused, letting the silence stretch between them. She realized it wasn't her gift that was wrong. It was the environments she kept trying to fit it into. She stopped trying to be someone else. And when she finally found a place that valued quiet insight over loud leadership, everything changed. That night, Lucy lay awake in bed, her thoughts spinning. Maybe she'd been going about it all wrong. Maybe the answer wasn't becoming more confident or pretending to be someone she wasn't. Maybe it wasn't about fixing herself to fit the world. Maybe it was about finding the right corner of the world where her way of thinking, her deep focused way of seeing, was not only welcomed, but needed. That realization was the beginning of everything. The next morning, while combing through public financial reports, a personal habit to keep her mind sharp, Lucy opened the quarterly statements of Trace Trust, a high-profile fintech firm. She hadn't been looking for anything specific, but almost immediately a faint dissonance tugged at her attention, a whisper of something not quite right. To most eyes, it would have been nothing, an odd fluctuation, a statistical outlier. But Lucy had long since learned to trust those quiet, intuitive nudges. They had never failed her. She dove in. For 3 months, she buried herself in the data, cross-referencing figures, building models, and mapping out the architecture of patterns too subtle for detection software. What she uncovered was staggering. Trace Trust was hemorrhaging approximately $2,300,000, 0 cents a year. Leaks so minuscule and scattered that their systems had missed them completely. Someone was exploiting a blind spot in their transaction process, siphoning money in tiny, undetectable amounts, strategic withdrawals, each one crafted to stay under the radar. This wasn't just a mistake, this was an operation. Lucy assembled a 47-page report. Every line, every chart, meticulously built to tell a story only she could see. Her hands trembled as she printed the final page, not with fear, but with purpose. For the first time in years, she felt something anchoring her. This wasn't just about data. This was about protecting people, making things right. Across the room, Martha watched her with quiet intensity, sensing the change. "What will you do with all this, dear?" she asked gently. "I'm going to apply to Trace Trust," Lucy replied. "I'm going to show them what I found, and maybe they'll finally see that I have something valuable to offer." Martha's face softened, her eyes twinkling with pride. "Sometimes," she said, "the most important gifts come in packages that don't look impressive at first glance, but the right people will see what's inside." Unbeknownst to Lucy, just across the city, Trace Trust's CEO Marcus Doyle was pacing his office in frustration. Despite weeks of internal reviews and consulting with top-tier security analysts, the mysterious discrepancies in their ledgers remained unexplained. Millions were disappearing, and no one could tell him how or why. It was against this backdrop of corporate unease that Lucy, clutching her report like a lifeline, approached the towering 30-story glass headquarters of Trace Trust. The building loomed above her, cold and gleaming, its mirrored surface reflecting the overcast October sky. She stood on the sidewalk, breath shallow, heart pounding, her white-knuckled grip on the folder betraying the storm beneath her calm expression. This moment carried the weight of everything: her childhood pain, her mother's legacy, Martha's sacrifices, and 17 years of living in a world that never seemed built for people like her. This wasn't just a job interview, it was a chance to finally belong. Inside the lobby, a kind-faced security guard greeted her. His name tag read Henry Cooper. "First interview?" he asked gently. "Yes," Lucy whispered. She cleared her throat, summoning strength. "Yes, sir." Henry smiled, handing her a visitor's badge. "I've seen all kinds of people walk into this building over the years," he said. "The ones who are nervous usually care the most." "That's not a bad thing." His words landed like a small comfort blanket, but Lucy's anxiety still surged as she stepped into the elevator. On the ride up to the 8th floor, she rehearsed her opening lines for the 100th time. "Thank you for this opportunity. I've prepared an analysis of your security vulnerabilities that I believe you'll find valuable." But the moment the elevator doors slid open, her carefully constructed composure began to falter. The reception area was sleek, all glass and chrome, filled with the energetic hum of high-powered professionals gliding through their routines. Everyone seemed to belong, confident, polished, fluent in the unspoken language of corporate America. Lucy felt like a misplaced puzzle piece. The receptionist, a young woman with flawless makeup and a practiced smile, glanced up. "Conference room B, they're ready for you." The words hit like a drumbeat. Lucy walked into the room, pulse racing. The conference room was designed for intimidation. Mahogany table, high-backed leather chairs, cold lighting on one side, dimmer tones on the other. 3 people waited. Jenna Price, the poised HR director, with ice blue eyes that missed nothing. Tom Miller, the technical lead, already tapping distractedly on his phone. And Sarah Chen, finance director, checking her watch with the subtle impatience of someone already behind schedule. Lucy sat in the lone metal chair across from them, placing her folder gently on the table. Her hands shook slightly. She hoped they didn't notice. "I'm Jenna Price," the HR director began. "This is Tom Miller and Sarah Chen. Let's start with something simple. Tell us about yourself in 2 minutes or less. And keep in mind, we're looking for someone who can communicate clearly with clients, stakeholders, and team members at all levels." Lucy's stomach dropped. This was the part she dreaded. She had hoped to lead with her work, to let the numbers speak first. But now she was trapped in the most uncomfortable test of all, self-promotion. Reading. I'm Lucy Maddox," she began. Her voice wavered. She paused, took a breath, tried again. "I recently graduated magna cum laude with a degree in data science from the University of Washington." Hey, he said, giving her a discreet nod from the couch. But even as the words came out, she could feel their weight falling flat. She wasn't telling them who she really was. Not yet. Of the truth, the impact, the twist, that was still coming. "The last 3 months," Lucy began, her voice trembling just slightly, "I've been analyzing your company's publicly available financial reports because I discovered some unusual patterns that suggest—" "Excuse me?" Jenna raised a manicured hand with theatrical precision. Her eyebrows lifted in the kind of polished, performative surprise Lucy had seen in countless interviews. "We asked you to tell us about yourself." not to make assumptions about our internal security systems. That's quite a leap for someone who doesn't even work here yet, don't you think? A deep flush bloomed across Lucy's cheeks, that old, unwelcome warmth that came with embarrassment, with being spoken over and diminished. The same heat she had felt as a child when she misread social cues or spoke too soon in class. I didn't mean to presume anything, she said quickly. It's just that I found evidence of systematic fraud costing your company about $2,300,000, 0 cents annually. And I thought... Miss Maddox, Tom interrupted, finally looking up from his phone, his expression one of smug irritation. Let me stop you right there. We have an entire cybersecurity department. They're staffed with professionals who hold years of experience, advanced certifications, and access to real-time monitoring systems. They work around the clock using some of the most advanced technologies available. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. So, forgive me, but I find it not just unlikely, impossible, that a recent college graduate with no corporate background has uncovered something they missed. The words didn't just sting, they diminished her. Lucy physically felt herself shrinking under the weight of his tone, as though her seat had grown smaller beneath her. It wasn't the first time someone had dismissed her, not because they understood what she was saying, but because they couldn't imagine it coming from her. If you'd just take a look at the pattern analysis, she began again, gently sliding the folder open. Let's redirect this conversation, Sarah Chen cut in, tapping her pen against her notepad like a gavel. Her tone was clipped and efficient, already losing interest. We're here to evaluate your qualifications for an entry-level analyst role, not to hear conspiracy theories about our internal systems. Lucy hesitated. Her voice was small now, retreating with every word. I don't have much team experience, she admitted. I tend to work better independently, where I can focus deeply without the pressure of constant collaboration. But the analysis shows a repeated pattern of fraudulent activity every third day at 2:47 a.m., totaling... Mrs. Maddox. Jenna's voice sliced the air like a knife. It was the tone of someone whose patience had expired, professionally veiled in faux politeness. We're not here to explore speculative accusations. We're here to assess whether you'd be a good fit in a culture that thrives on confidence, collaboration, and clear communication. Lucy looked down at the folder resting beneath her fingertips. 47 pages of work she had poured herself into. 3 months of sleepless nights, of mapping numbers and cross-checking anomalies. It could save Trace Trust millions. It could protect customers. It mattered. But they didn't care. All they wanted was small talk, eye contact, flawless articulation. She had walked in with a solution to a problem they couldn't solve, and she was being told she was the problem. I understand that communication is important, Lucy whispered, her voice nearly inaudible, but sometimes good work is communication. If you look at page 23, the pattern analysis. I think we've heard enough, Jenna said, standing up and closing her portfolio in one smooth final motion. Ms. Maddox, you're clearly bright and enthusiastic, but we're looking for someone who can engage clients, speak with clarity under pressure, and present themselves with confidence. Tom was already scrolling through his phone again. Sarah collected her papers, barely glancing at Lucy. Jenna turned toward the door, signaling that the interview was over. Could I at least leave the analysis with you? Lucy asked, her voice breaking like glass underfoot. It really does show a vulnerability, one that's serious. Jenna smiled thinly, the kind of smile that was colder than silence. That won't be necessary. We already have industry experts reviewing our systems regularly. But thank you for your initiative. The word initiative landed like a slap of tungsten, hollow. Lucy stood. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her. She held the folder to her chest like a shield and nodded, saying the words she'd said too many times before. Thank you for your time. As the conference room door clicked shut behind her, she heard Tom murmur, "Well, that was interesting. Did she really think we'd hire someone who can't handle a basic interview? Was it an impression?" Their laughter trailed behind her like ghosts as she walked down the corridor, each chuckle a small, invisible wound that pressed deeper into her skin. Lucy stumbled into the elevator, heart aching, body cold. The ride down felt like a free fall into shame. In the grand marble lobby, she sat heavily on a bench near the security desk, her folder still clutched in her hands like a life preserver from a shipwreck. She was trying not to cry. Not here, not where everyone could see. "Rough interview?" The voice was gentle, familiar. Lucy looked up to see Henry Cooper, the security guard from earlier. His eyes were soft, filled with the kind of understanding that only comes from decades of watching people fall and rise again. She offered a fragile smile. "How do you know?" 20 years of watching hopefuls walk in and out of this place. There's a way people move when they've just been told they're not enough. He sat beside her, his motion slow and careful. "What's in the folder you're holding like it's the crown jewels?" Lucy hesitated. Why would he care? Why tell him? But something about his presence, the patience in his posture, the lack of judgment, made her trust him. "It's research," she said softly. "I found evidence of fraud. I spent months analyzing public transaction data from Trace Trust. I tried to show them, but—" Henry raised an eyebrow. "May I?" She nodded, opening the folder, flipping to the first few charts. He leaned in, scanning the pages, his brow furrowing in focus. For several minutes he said nothing. "You built these models yourself?" he finally asked. "Yes. I reverse-engineered the system. They're exploiting a flaw in the timing of batch transactions, just under detection thresholds." Henry looked up, and for the first time Lucy saw a glimmer of something she hadn't seen all day. "Respect." "Lucy," he said, his voice firm now. "Before I took this security job, I was a professor of applied mathematics at the University of Washington for 37 years. My specialty? Statistical pattern recognition." "Ha!" Lucy's eyes widened in disbelief. "What you've done here," Henry continued, "this is beyond impressive. You've uncovered a deeply buried vulnerability using publicly available data. That's not beginner-level work. That's genius. But they said what people always say when they encounter something they don't understand," Henry interrupted, gently but firmly. "They dismissed you. But Lucy, this," he tapped the folder, "this could save the company. Protect real people." He stood, decision already made. "There's someone who needs to see this. Someone who will understand what you've done." "Who?" Lucy asked, breathless. "Marcus Doyle," Henry said. "The CEO. And I'm going to make sure he sees it today." 8 years ago, Marcus Doyle had fallen victim to a devastating case of financial fraud, an experience that had shaped everything about the way he led his company. It had cost him his life savings, his confidence, and nearly his future. But in its aftermath, it had given him something just as powerful, a deeply honed instinct, one that didn't ignore red flags, one that had learned to trust the smallest whispers of unease. That instinct was flaring now. The financial discrepancies Trace Trust had been experiencing for months, subtle but persistent, weren't going away. They weren't large enough to scream emergency, but they were steady enough to keep Marcus awake at night. He was staring down another report, tension radiating from his jawline, when a knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said without looking up. To his surprise, it was Henry Cooper, the building's security guard, stepping into the room holding a thick folder. Henry was quiet, respected. In 5 years he had never once interrupted Marcus or overstepped. If Henry was standing here now, it meant something. "I'm sorry for the disruption, Mr. Doyle," Henry said, "but you need to see this." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "A young woman just left a job interview downstairs. She was rejected by HR, but what she's uncovered." Henry set the folder on the desk with gentle reverence. "It could explain everything. She found the source of the financial irregularities." Marcus flipped open the folder. Within seconds, his demeanor shifted. Curiosity turned to concentration, and then to astonishment. Page after page, line after line, Lucy's analysis was unlike anything he had seen. Her breakdown of transaction timing patterns, her reconstruction of internal processes based solely on public data, her calm, data-driven exposition of the fraud pathway, it was staggering. "This transaction timing analysis," Marcus murmured, his finger tracing the detailed graphs. "She pinpointed the exact vulnerability. How did she even get this information?" "She didn't," Henry replied. "Everything she used came from public records. She reverse-engineered your internal systems by analyzing what was publicly available. She built the entire model from the outside in." Marcus looked up, astonished. "She not only found the hole," Henry added, "she built the fix." "She?" "Her name's Lucy Maddox. She's 24, lives with her grandmother, just graduated in data science. She did this on her own time because she wanted to help. She's across the street right now at the coffee shop." Marcus glanced out his window. There, in the corner of a modest cafe, was a young woman with hunched shoulders and a laptop open before her. She looked small, worn, and utterly alone. He was already grabbing his coat. "Not if I get there first." The coffee shop was quiet in the late afternoon. Lucy sat in the corner, her laptop screen filled with job postings she couldn't bring herself to care about. She was exhausted, not physically, but soul-tired. Tired of being overlooked. Tired of working so hard just to be dismissed. "Excuse me, are you Lucy Maddox?" She looked up. A tall man in a dark suit stood before her. A sense of familiarity in his posture. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "My name is Marcus Doyle," he said. "CEO of Trace Trust. May I sit?" Lucy froze. Her face paled. "Oh, no. Did I do something wrong? I didn't mean to—" "You did nothing wrong," Marcus said gently, settling into the chair across from her. "In fact, you may have just saved my company." He placed her folder on the table and opened it. "I've spent the last hour with your report. It's extraordinary." Lucy stared, waiting for the inevitable turn, for him to say she'd overstepped, misunderstood, presumed too much. But instead, he asked, "Can you walk me through how you identified the 247 AEM transaction pattern?" And for the first time that day, Lucy felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Confidence. She sat straighter. "I began by analyzing transaction time distributions," she explained. "Most platforms follow predictable user behavior, activity peaking during work hours, but I noticed a recurring anomaly, a micro spike at 2:47 IA Eastern every third day." Marcus leaned in, fascinated. "At first I thought it might be internal maintenance, but then I cross-referenced account activity. These transactions came from dormant accounts. No logins, no purchases, except those anomalies. That's when I realized someone was using a processing gap." For 20 minutes they talked. Lucy explained her logic, her data sources, her methodology. And Marcus, CEO of a billion-dollar company, listened. Not impatiently, not condescendingly, but like a man who had just found the missing piece of a very dangerous puzzle. Finally, Marcus sat back, visibly moved. In 8 years of running Trace Trust, he said, I've never seen analysis this sharp. Not from our staff, not even from external consultants. Lucy's eyes burned with unshed tears. Your HR director said it was presumptuous, she whispered. Marcus's expression hardened. She was wrong. What you did is exactly the kind of initiative and insight we should be begging for. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card and scribbled on the back. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., my office. We need to talk about your future at Trace Trust. As he rose, he paused. Lucy, in my experience, the most valuable voices often come from those who observe in silence, rather than those who speak the loudest. Thank you for seeing what others missed. The next morning, Lucy stood outside the Trace Trust Tower wearing a navy blue dress once worn by Martha in her youth. It had been altered to fit Lucy's smaller frame, and as she adjusted the sleeves, she remembered Martha's words from the night before. This dress has carried me through life-changing moments, her grandmother had said. Through job interviews, through grief, through the day I chose to raise you. It knows how to help quiet women step into their power. And now, it was Lucy's turn. This elevator ride felt different. She still held her folder. But now, it wasn't armor. It was proof. Proof that she was valuable, that her voice mattered, that her difference was her strength. On the 31st floor, she was greeted not by cold glares or stiff formality, but by warmth. The space was filled with soft lighting, wooden accents, and walls lined with photographs, not of board members but of community events, handwritten thank you notes and employee celebrations. It was a place that spoke of purpose. Marcus's assistant welcomed her with a smile. Mr. Doyle is eager to meet with you. He's been talking about your work all morning. When she entered the office, Lucy was stunned. Her report had been laid out across a wide conference table, annotated, color-coded, with supplementary charts and new calculations. Marcus had studied it, verified it, built upon it. The down and educated Please sit, Marcus said, motioning to the chair beside him. Not across, but beside. Equal. Partner. I want to start with an apology, he said sincerely. Yesterday's interview? That's not what Trace Trust stands for. You deserved better. It's okay, Lucy said, surprised by how steady her voice felt. I know I'm not great at interviews. Marcus smiled gently. Traditional interviews are great at identifying people who are good at traditional interviews, he said. They're terrible at identifying brilliance that doesn't come in a loud package. He gestured toward the spread of documents. After you and Henry left, I stayed late, read every word. I called an emergency meeting with our cybersecurity team at 7 this morning. He pulled out a tablet and showed her a dashboard. Real-time system monitoring. You were right. We were losing an average of $2,300,000 0 cents annually through the exact fraud you identified. We've already implemented your fix. That vulnerability? Gone as of 6 a.m. Lucy blinked, trying to absorb it all. You didn't just find the problem, Lucy. You solved it. Marcus moved to the window, eyes scanning the city skyline with a kind of reverence that only comes from seeing something familiar through new eyes. Lucy, he said, voice low but reverent, what you accomplished in 3 months, completely independently, using nothing but public data, is more sophisticated than anything our entire cybersecurity department achieved in a full year, with every tool and every resource at their disposal. He turned to face her again, but this time there was more than admiration in his gaze. There was awe. But here's what's truly extraordinary, he continued. You didn't just find the vulnerability, you understood the why, the psychology behind the attack. You saw that they chose 2:47 a.m. not randomly but deliberately, because that's the exact moment our overnight batch processing creates a 17-second blind spot. You didn't just analyze the numbers, You understood the minds behind them. Lucy felt warmth swell in her chest. The sensation was so foreign it almost startled her. She was being seen, not for who she was supposed to be, but for exactly who she had always been. Marcus's expression shifted, serious but energized. "Before our team verified your findings," he said, "we expanded the analysis using your methodology. We found 3 additional vulnerabilities, 3 ones our systems never detected. You've opened a door we didn't even know existed." He moved to his desk and pulled out a formal folder bearing the Trace Trust letterhead. "I don't want to offer you the analyst role you applied for," he said. "I want to offer you something far more meaningful." Lucy blinked, her heart thudding. "I want you to lead a new division," Marcus said, "called Quiet Intelligence, a department dedicated to deep analytical minds like yours, people who see beneath the surface. Your job would be to do exactly what you do best: see the unseen, prevent problems before they bloom, protect what others overlook." He opened the folder. "The salary is 3 times what the analyst role paid, full benefits, and most importantly, total flexibility. You can work remotely, submit reports in writing instead of presenting, build a team of people who think like you." Lucy couldn't speak. This wasn't a job offer. It was validation. It was the world finally turning to meet her where she stood, soft-spoken, careful, deliberate, and saying, "You belong." "There's something else," Marcus added, his voice softer now. 8 years ago, I lost everything. $50,000, my entire savings, gone overnight to an online fraud scheme. It wasn't just the money. It was my security, my sense of self. That experience taught me something brutal and necessary. He looked her in the eye. Fraud doesn't just empty accounts. It empties people. And the ones who prevent it, they're not always the loudest in the room. They're the ones who notice, who care, like you. At that moment there was a knock. "Come in," Marcus called. To Lucy's surprise, Jenna Price entered. Her posture was different. Her eyes were softer. She looked human. "Lucy," Jenna began, her voice quiet. "I owe you an apology." Lucy tensed. "Yesterday I failed you," Jenna said. "I judged you based on style, not substance. I thought confidence looked like a firm handshake and eye contact. I was wrong." She sat across from Lucy and met her gaze. "Your work has already saved Trace Trust millions. But more than that, it's taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. Wisdom isn't always loud. Impact isn't always obvious. And strength doesn't always announce itself." Lucy felt something heavy inside her begin to dissolve. "I'm rewriting our hiring protocols," Jenna continued. "From now on, we'll give candidates options, written evaluations, sample projects, alternate interview formats. We're going to find people like you, Lucy. People who've been overlooked for far too long." Marcus nodded. "Jenna will be working with you directly. We want Quiet Intelligence to be a model, not just for security, but for how we find and value talent." Lucy thought of her grandmother, of their small apartment, of the bills they once worried over. But more than that, she thought of all the people like her, quiet, brilliant, unseen. "I want to accept," she said, "but on one condition." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I want to start a mentorship program," Lucy said, "to find people like me. People with valuable insights who've been told they need to be someone else to succeed. I want to help them find a way in without changing who they are." Marcus smiled, and in that moment, Lucy felt not like an employee, but like a partner. Consider it done. The transformation was instant, but the impact would ripple for years. Lucy's office sat on the 15th floor, its window looking out over the same skyline that once loomed like a wall. Now, It looked like opportunity. Her nameplate read, Lucy Maddox, Director of Quiet Intelligence. She led a team of 12, each one carefully selected, each one an outsider, once rejected by traditional hiring filters. Together, they had stopped 17 unique fraud attempts and saved over $15 million, 0 cents. But more than the money, they had changed something bigger. The culture. Meetings now had quiet time for written input. Brainstorms welcomed silence. Interviews were reimagined to discover hidden brilliance. End of Book 3. And today? Today was different. Today, Lucy was presenting Trace Trust's innovations to a global security conference. A year ago, the thought would have paralyzed her. But she had learned something about courage. It wasn't about speaking loud. It was about knowing you had something worth saying. In the front row sat Martha, 83 years old, holding a handkerchief. Next to her was Henry Cooper, retired but now an advisor to Lucy's team. As Lucy stepped onto the stage, nerves fluttered through her. But they weren't fear. They were significance. "Thank you for being here today," she began, her voice clear. "Today I want to talk about a formula. Quiet observation, plus deep analysis, plus supportive environment equals revolutionary insight." She walked the audience through case studies, breakthroughs, and the evolution of quiet intelligence. And for the first time, the world listened to what had once been a whisper. When the applause ended, Lucy returned home, to the apartment she shared with Martha by choice, not necessity. That night, as always, they sat together. Martha knitting, Lucy at her laptop. Only now, she wasn't searching for acceptance. She was writing a letter to her younger self. Dear Lucy, who feels invisible, who whispers when the world demands shouting, who sees what others miss. You are not broken, you are not insufficient, you are necessary. Find the people who listen, they are waiting for you. She hit save. And somewhere, she knew, another quiet voice was preparing to change the world. And maybe this time, someone would listen.